They asked him a question. He knew the answer. He said nothing. That is the whole story. Everything else is context. He said nothing. And he survived that moment. Not because silence was the right choice. Not because silence guaranteed anything. He survived that moment because of what happened next. And what happened next was not something he could have predicted when they asked the question. He did not know that silence would save him. He could not have known. April 1942, the Philippine island of Luzon, the Bataan Peninsula. American and Filipino forces had been fighting since December 1941. They had held the peninsula for months under conditions that made survival itself a daily achievement. Food had run out. Medicine had run out. Reinforcements had not come. The order to surrender came on April 9, 1942. Approximately 75,000 American and Filipino soldiers laid down their weapons. It was one of the largest surrenders in American military history. What followed was the Bataan Death March. The prisoners were forced to march approximately 65 miles under armed guard, from Mariveles at the southern tip of the peninsula to San Fernando in the north. From there, they were loaded onto rail cars and transported to Camp O'Donnell. The march took days. The prisoners were already weakened before the first step. Months of reduced rations, disease, and combat had hollowed most men out. Many had malaria. Many had dysentery. Many had wounds that had not been properly treated. They marched in heat that reached over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Water was restricted. Food was scarce. Men who fell were dealt with harshly. The pace did not slow. Thousands did not survive. American deaths during the march numbered in the hundreds. Filipino deaths in the thousands. Those who arrived at Camp O'Donnell arrived barely standing. He was one of the ones who arrived. He had survived the march. That was already more than many could say. He had done it by doing what the moment demanded. Moving forward, not drawing attention, staying upright when everything in him wanted to stop. He had learned something on that march. There was no consistent logic to who survived and who did not. He had seen stronger men fall. He had seen broken men keep walking. He had looked for the pattern. There was no pattern. There was only what happened, and then what happened next. He carried that into the camp. Camp O'Donnell was a former Philippine Army training base. It was not built for the number of men now inside it. Sanitation was inadequate. Medical supplies were nearly gone. The water supply could not support the population. Men kept dying after the march ended. Dysentery moved through the barracks. Malaria, malnutrition. The camp conditions were later documented in post-war military tribunals as part of the formal record of war crimes. He was in this camp when they called his name. The interrogations were not uniform. Some were brief. Some went on longer. Some involved interpreters. Some did not. Some involved physical pressure. Some ended quietly. Men talked afterward, quietly, in the barracks. Who had been called? What had been asked? What happened when they came back? The information never formed a pattern. Some men spoke. They were left alone. Some men spoke. They were called back again. Some men said nothing. They were punished. Some men said nothing. They were returned to the barracks without a word. The outcomes did not match the choices. There was no formula. There was no safe answer. There was no calculation that worked. He knew all of this before they called him. He had listened. He had tried to find the logic. He had tried to find the choice that produced the safest result. He had not found it. The other men had not found it. The information was always incomplete. It was always incomplete. He was called in the morning. The room was not large. A table. Japanese officers. An interpreter. The interpreter spoke English. The questions came clearly. What unit were you with? What was your commanding officer's name? Where were the supply depots positioned? He understood every word. There was no confusion. He knew what they were asking. He knew why they were asking it. The information was military information. It was real. it could be used. He also understood something else. He did not know what was going to happen after this room. He did not know if answering would change anything. He did not know if the men who had spoken before him were better off or worse. He did not know if silence would bring immediate consequences or whether he would simply be sent back. He did not know. He knew the question. He knew the answer. He did not know anything else. He said nothing. The question was asked. He looked at the interpreter. He looked at the table. He said nothing. The question was asked again. He said nothing. Men who survived interrogations described this dynamic. The pressure of a repeated question. The decision to absorb it rather than release it. They did not call it bravery. They called it stillness. A decision not to move. Not to give the thing being requested. He did not know if stillness would help him. He chose it anyway. The question was asked a third time. He said nothing. The interrogation ended. No acknowledgement, no punishment announced. The session simply stopped. He was returned to the barracks. He was not punished immediately. He was not rewarded. He was placed back among the other men in the same conditions he had left. He had said nothing. And nothing had immediately changed. He sat with that. This is the part of the story that does not resolve cleanly. He survived that interrogation. Days passed, weeks passed. He survived the conditions at Camp O'Donnell. Many prisoners were later transferred to Cabana Tuan as O'Donnell's conditions deteriorated further. Men continued to survive or not survive based on circumstances that no single decision could control. Survival across the Bataan prisoner experience did not follow a reliable rule. It was not a clean function of compliance or resistance. Survivors described combinations of physical condition, timing, circumstance, and chance that could not be reduced to one choice made in one room on one morning. He was not saved by silence. He was not guaranteed anything by silence. He was simply not destroyed by it in that particular moment. The next moment brought its own unknowns. He did not know that silence would save him. He could not have known. The other men could not have told him. The outcomes never added up to a rule. The room offered no signal. The interpreter's face told him nothing about what had happened to the men who sat there before him. He made a choice under conditions of total uncertainty. He chose not to speak. The result, in that moment, was that he was returned to the barracks. Whether speaking would have changed that outcome cannot be known. That is the documented reality of the Bataan prisoner experience. Not all who refused were punished. Not all who cooperated were protected. The logic of survival in that place, in that period, did not resolve into anything a man could reliably follow. He chose silence. He survived that moment. The two facts exist together in time. Whether one caused the other is a question that cannot be answered. Decisions made under total uncertainty carry a weight that other decisions do not. When you cannot know the outcome, the choice is no longer strategy. It becomes something else. Something closer to what a person is when the information is removed. When the calculation cannot be finished. When you are left only with the question and the answer you are holding in the room you did not choose to be in. He knew the answer. He said nothing. He did not know that silence would save him. He would not have been able to tell you afterward whether it did. You would not know either. You would be standing in that room. The question would be in the air, and you would have to decide. What would you do?